All right, so good morning, everyone. Our recording is
Okay, let
on.
me get my safer.
So we are going to continue and Simon Reish Pei Vav, Sif Dalid. Just to remind us, last week we had the discussion about in Gimel about whether it's permissible or not, or what level or how much can one eat in a way that is permissible before they daven Musaf. And we saw that it's certainly, everyone agrees that it's ideal not to eat until after davening Musaf. But if one needs to, um, one could taste something, have something very, very, very small. Um, um, and if one needed to, because they are feeling weak and they need to give themselves a little more strength to continue davening, and more kavana during davening, then perhaps you could have a little bit more. There was a machlokas, and it seems to be that we should try very much, like the Aruch HaShulchan at the end of his discussion about this said, we could explain that since you've already davened shachris, really you did take care of davening before you took care of your own needs. Um, but the minhag is that unless somebody's feeling weak, we don't rely on the material and on the opinion that it permits this. Um, in such circumstance, again, unless one is not feeling weak, then you can rely on the opinions that permit you to eat before Musaf, but after Shachris. For sure, but before Shachris, not even no one will tell you that it's permissible. Again, unless one doesn't feel well or something like that, then that's a different story.
That's broken. If the
Yeah.
doctor told you to eat,
Then there's a different story. Then there's a medical reason that you need to eat. If you need to take medication or whatever, that's a different story.
okay.
Yeah, that might be the quintessential definition of feeling really, weak. And also, if you have a medical issue, the whole thing with not eating in general before shachris is midrabanan. And so, if there's any medical reason that one needs to be eating first thing when they wake up, or take certain medications when they wake up, and needs to be with food, then you need to take care of your health. Yeah, you need to do that. Okay.
Rob,
Yes, Simeon, go ahead.
Rob, I just wanted to make one point. It's a little bit far afield, but when we had the Hashkama Minyan, I used to meet with Diane in the main Minyan Kiddush after davening, and between the time of the end of the Minyan and now Steve would run a shear in Mishnah Brura. In fact, we actually completed, while I was there, 5 of the 6 volumes. But I remember very specifically learning in one of the earlier volumes that if you're not feeling well on a Shabbos, if you're not feeling well on a Shabbos, you
Mhm.
may break Shabbos on your own volition and do what is necessary or go to a doctor on Shabbos to address the problem. And he says, and if you run around looking for a doctor or looking for a rabbi to give you the right to do that, to give you permission, he says the following: that is Chasidus Shel Shtus. And in all of the 5 volumes, I never heard the Chafetz Chaim use the word shtus except for that time.
Yeah, so you're right, and we're going to get there in a few years in Shin Chav Ches, if I remember correctly, that's where it is. Yeah, but that's if there's a sakana or suffix sakana, is a very serious medical issue. Yeah, if there is such an issue, um, the poskim say that it should be even afilu gadol, the gadol should be Israel, should be the one, to break Shabbos in that situation. So like it's upon the rabbi to be the one to make the phone call to the ambulance or whatever is needed. So yeah, 100%. Very good. Yep. All right. Let's go. Let's jump in a little bit, and then we'll have to have time for some more questions. Okay, let's jump in here. So let's go to Sif Dalid. היו לפניו שתי תפילות, אחת של מנחה ואחת של מוספים, כגון שעה שאיחר מלהספל תפילת מוסף עד 6 שעות ומחצה. So it adds in here, this may be the Ramah, not the Ramah, not clear. Some of these little add-ons are not necessarily His. That's the source of it, because if he was copying from the, because he worked, not copying in a bad way, but he was working off the Mechaber worked off the Tur, and so so the word mechza makes a big difference here. We'll explain in a second. Shuzman tfilas mincha tzarich lispal shal mincha tchila v'achar kach shal musaf. So the Mechaber says if you have two tefillos in front of you, Mincha and Musaf, because you delayed saying Musaf for whatever reason until after 6.5 hours. Now this makes a big difference, because if it's after the 6th hour, after the midday point of the day, it's not the time for Mincha. Maybe b'diavad after Chatzos Hayom, but before the 12:30 mark, or the 6 hour and 30 mark, you know. It's not yet Zman Tefillah for Mincha. Mincha Gedola is really a half hour after Chatzos Hayom. There's the understanding is, though, if a person davens Mincha too early in that 30 minutes between Chatzos and Mincha Gedola, like, why do we have that 30-minute wait? It's afternoon now. It's literally after the midpoint of the day. The reason we wait till Mincha Gedola is to be sure that truly it is time for Mincha. The position of the sun is much more easy to notice, that it is slightly off from being above your head, and therefore it's clearly Mincha Gedola. Yeah, correct. It's and so it's. But if you davened before, but after Chatzos, but before Mincha Gedola, some mistake was made. This happened once in my life. I was in the back in the day when I used to be an APAC policy conference. One of my first few years here, I went, and maybe it was my very first year going, and I got pulled into there was a rabbinic lunch, dinner, or whatever, for all the rabbis who were in attendance, and I went, and one of the rabbis who I knew said, "Oh, it was around. It was not dinner. It was definitely a lunch," and pulled everybody. He said, "Okay, let's daven mincha." Before everything started, we daven. I then looked at my Maizmanim thing here. I was like, man, some people were like, maybe we davened too early. I looked; it was after Chatzos, so it was before Mincha Gedola. So, yeah, but okay, you shouldn't do that, but you don't have to repeat Mincha. So that 30 minutes is important. That's why the Umechza is there important, because if it's Sheishos, you could daven Musaf. There's no real machlokas. Which should I daven first, Mincha or Musaf? So after the Sheishos, the Mechza. So really, it's again past the midpoint of the day here. Now it's man tefillas mincha. So now, what should you do? So the mechaber paskins, you should daven mincha first and then daven musaf. Okay. Now most of us don't deal with this situation, because usually daven musaf well before we get to mincha gedola. Okay, even in the winter months here.
How is the order changed?
So he will explain. Good, excellent. Like, why would we change the order? Because the thing is, we think of it as an order, but there isn't an order. We think of it as an order because the sitter has that is such an order. Most stuff is really it's best at till the end of the 7th hour, right? And after the 7th hour, really, okay, all right, Isman is kol hayom, right? But let's keep going here for just a moment. Let's just read on, and then we'll look at the Mishnah Berurah. Then we'll circle back here just to understand all this. Let's look at the Mishnah Berurah. We are up to Sif Katan Yud Shal Mincha Gedola. He writes here Shehu Tadir. So this already gives you a little bit of svara. Why would we say Mincha before we daven Musaf? They're both relevant right now, and I know in the Art Scroll Siddur it has Musaf after Shachris. But that's because usually we don't have a daven Musaf right after Shachas, because we're told we should do that. But if, let's say, Musaf got pushed off till later, so what should you do? He says daven mincha, because tadir v'she'enu tadir kodem. If you have something frequent and something infrequent, you should do the frequent thing first if they're both relevant at that moment. If they're both not relevant, so do Musaf first, right? Because if it's not daven mincha yet. So, which is also perhaps the same reason we daven Shachris before we daven Musaf. That's also with the Karbanos. But it's another svara in the corner of davening Shachris first. Now look at Yud Aleph Yatza. Oh no, sorry, that's not relevant to this part yet. Okay, hold on. So that's it in terms of Tadir V'Sheino Tadir Kodem is the reason we daven Mincha according to the Mechaber first.
Where this would be applicable is, I don't know about in this shul, but in a lot of shuls on Simchas Torah,
Musaf ends up kind of being very late.
Very late.
Yeah.
And so it's during this time of Mincha.
Yes. So those who are listening on Zoom, David was pointing out that in some shuls, not ours, but with Musaf and on Simchas Torah ends up starting quite late. It would make 2 o'clock, even at 1:30, something like that. It would make sense to daven Mincha first, and then do Musaf. Yes, that would be a practical application of this. We're going to see that even in such a world, it's not done. But it would, if you took the Mechaber at his word, that would be absolutely the application of that halacha. Yeah, Jeffrey.
We're also assuming that a lot of people would daven mincha at mincha gedola. A lot of people do not, right? They will wait until mincha ketana, right, until later on in the afternoon. So,
Sure.
Would this apply to them? Because that's sort of in contrary to what they're.
So Jeffrey was asking for those listening on Zoom about that mincha gedola is like the earliest time you daven mincha, but the ideal time in halacha daven mincha is mincha ketana, because that's historically speaking when they would have brought the korban of the afternoon. So look what the Mechaber says here. Let's look at the Ramah Mechaber. Let's keep going because he addresses this point and an important caveat to this whole rule that we've read so far. The Ramah throws in, Umihu im hiktim shal musaf yatsa. If you did do musaf first before mincha, okay, so you're yotze. You don't have to go back and do anything. Whatever. Okay, you didn't follow the rule of tadir v'sheino tadir kodem, but okay. Then look what he says here. V'yesh omrim, and this comes from Tosfos and the Rush. Dahayu davka shetzarich ata lihispal al shteihem. When is this irrelevant? When is this a relevant piece that you're trying to look at? Mincha, Musaf, what should I do first? This is when I need to daven. Sorry, when I need to do davening right now. Where I daven, I dafka need to eat daven both right now. What's the example? I want to eat, and we know there's a rule separate of anything to do with Shabbos. There's a rule that before I could daven mincha, before I could eat in the afternoon, and if I have mincha hanging over my head, I have to daven mincha. Why? Because if I don't daven mincha, then I might forget to daven, because I'll eat and get carried away.
You're talking about the third meal of Shabbos.
No, it's never
You're not talking about lunch.
We're talking about after 6 and after Mincha Gedola starts. Maybe I didn't eat lunch yet. By the way, it's possible I didn't eat lunch. So the question is,
that's every Shabbos. Every Shabbos in the winter.
right? But here we've davened Musaf already, though. So are you saying in terms of davening Mincha? Yeah. Oh, good. Yes, excellent. So we're gonna deal with that question right now. So David was pointing out, what do you mean? Every Shabbos we daven Mincha like 13 minutes before, 15 minutes before Shabbos ends. We all started a meal, at some point after Mincha Gedola.
Yeah.
So yes, 100%. We're going to deal with that question. So he says, what's an example of this? You want to eat. But I don't need to have musaf. Let's say I don't need to eat right now. I ate. I had my Shabbos meal. I just didn't have a musaf. So now I owe a musaf and I have a mincha hanging over my head. I'm not in a rush. I don't have to eat. So then daven musaf first. But this goes to Jeffrey's point now. Umihu, the Rama adds, imhi gia mincha ktana. Yispal mincha tchila. But if it's mincha ketana, 9.5 hours into the day, right? You're thinking of 10 and 3/4 being plaga mincha. That's between 9.5 and the end of the day. That's the midway point between the mincha ketana and the end of the day. That's the plaga mincha. Yeah. So then, if I get the mincha ketana, then I need to have mincha first, because then it's the ideal time for mincha. And to put off the ideal time for mincha when I'm already davening, I'm in davening mode. So then you're doing it the wrong way. You should daven mincha first and then go back and do musaf. Now let's look at the Yud Aleph, and then I know Simeon, I saw you had a hand, so I'm going to come to you next, Simeon, after we do Yud Aleph and Yud Beis and Yud Gimel. So Yud Aleph, Yotza. The Tadir Kodem Hu Rak Lemitzvah Ulechatchila V'lo Liyikuva Uv'Diavad. right? The idea of I daven mincha, I'm supposed to daven mincha before I daven musaf in this situation because of tadir v'sheino tadir. Well, tadir v'sheino tadir is a mitzvah. It makes it lichatchila. I'll do it in this order, right? But if I don't do it in the right order, it's not to say it's liikufa that the mitzvah you didn't do the mitzvah correctly. That's not the way to understand it. So you would still be yotze even if you daven musaf before you daven mincha. Even according to the situation where I need to daven in order to eat. Yod Beis, Kagon Shirot Lechol, right? I want to eat. That's why if I need to daven right now, so that's when I have to put mincha first because I need to daven mincha anyways. Kagon Shirot Lechol, the Fima Damasik, Haramala Elba Simon Reish Lamed Beis, Sif Beis Bahaga. According to what the Ramah Paskin earlier in Shulchan Aruch, in the halachos of Hilchot Tfilas Mincha, not about Shabbos. He writes over there, Ein lesor lechol kodem mincha kishigias zman mincha gedola ela besuda gedola. If you remember, we learned this, folks, way back, a number of years ago now, in the Shir. This is towards the end of Chelek Beis of the Mishnah Berurah. That when am I not allowed to eat before I daven mincha? Around mincha gedola. That's when it's a seuda gedola. What's a seuda gedola? Well, he says here, Suda Shabbos, lo mikre Suda Gedola. A Shabbos meal is not considered a big Suda. What is? The examples that were given in that simon over there were a Sudas Nisuin and a Sudas Bris Mila. Now, so you're a wedding meal, wedding reception, or the meal following a Bris Mila. These are a Suda Gedola, where you can think about a wedding as the perfect example, right? You're very susceptible to a very long reception, and there's dancing and and there's a social aspect to it, and we can lose track of time, and so therefore they said no, daven first, and then you lose track of time. And also, there's probably also alcohol involved, right? And so once you have too much in your system, it's not shaykh to daven. So also the same with the Sudas Bris Mila, it's a Sudas mitzvah, and by the way. Maybe we didn't do Sudas Bris like this, but many people do a Sudas Bris like it's a blowout, and it's a few hour ordeal. I was actually just talking to Sandy Shmueli. For those of you who know Sandy Shmueli, plays music at all sorts of Westchester State School. He does a lot of the music because there's a lot of schools in the tri-state area. He was telling me recently because B'Shat Torah, he's expecting a grandchild, and so he was telling me that when he had a son that was born. He made a bris, and it was it was music. He's a very musical guy. It was music. It was a whole to-do. He invited this singer, and it was a multi-hour affair. So I don't know. Our brisses today, are very you go, there's a speech, you grab a bagel, and you're out the door. We don't feel like it's a big suda, but I don't know if it was always like that. I wonder if it was more the other style of it was a big suda, and you made a big deal out of it. So that's the suda gedola. And a Suda Shabbos doesn't fit that. So to the point that was being brought up earlier, if you're eating at 1:30 in the afternoon, that's when you start your meal. No big deal. You're just not allowed to have a Suda. You're not, a Suda Gedola, which is like a wedding or a Bris Mila meal. We're not worried with the Shabbos meal that you'll be poshe, you'll be negligent, and you'll never daven mincha. What was that?
They don't know start there.
Right, by the way, right, multi-hour affairs, right? Uvifrat ha'idna the somcher al kriya lebeis haknes. He says, particularly today, we rely on people calling us to shul. The shamish goes around, mincha, mincha, mincha in 10 minutes. Right, he goes around the little shtetl, and he goes and knocks on everybody's door. He says, for sure, you don't have to worry they're going to forget mincha when everybody's being called mincha, mincha, mincha. And I would add that today, with the advent of watches and clocks watches being very common, and clocks being all over the place, and minyan being scheduled the way it was never such a clear schedule like it is today. Mincha, you can tell to the second what time we're going to start it. So you know what time mincha is. You have a clock. And also, if you're accustomed to always going to minyan, that's also another, a kula, that you have in your bag. I'm always accustomed to going to this particular minyan to daven. So ein sarich lihispal ata mincha. You don't need to rush mincha early on, because how could I eat if I don't daven mincha right now? So that deals with a lot of our problems today in terms of this particular sif. because we are accustomed to davening at the usual time as the sun is setting. We advertise the time of the davening. Often there's multiple people in the home who want to daven, so one can help the other in terms of remembering, etc., etc. And Suda Shabbos is not considered a Suda Gedola and halach. I'm not saying that it doesn't mean it's not a big meal. I grant you that Suda Gedola here doesn't mean big meal. It means a big affair. That's almost how I would call it, a big affair. And also I grant you, yes, even though in Scarsdale often Shabbos lunches are big affairs that are multi-hour experiences. That's not you can't be ain't gozer al tzibor just because Scarsdale does it. Anyways, Simeon, you wanted to ask a question.
Yes, I wanted to ask a question, but I also just want to point out he also makes the point that Mincha and Shabbos has Kriyas HaTorah in it, so it's got an elevated importance.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, that would mean that if you're doing mincha before Musaf, you would have Kriyas HaTorah. Yeah, it'd be a little bit longer davening before you get back to davening Musaf. Correct.
My question, Rav, is this: after Churban Bayis Sheni, Chazal fixed the tefillot in lieu of the korbanot that we could no longer bring.
Yes.
And Korban Musaf always preceded Korban Mincha.
The time of the afternoon. Yes. Yes,
So,
and
how does all these Chachamim justify switching them around back and forth, back and forth?
so let's imagine a world here where the Chachamim, where something happened in the Beis Hamikdash one day, and the Korban Musaf didn't happen at its usual time. The Zman of Korban Musaf is really b'di'evet kol hayom, right? Ideally, you should be before the 7th hour, but if let's say something happened, they couldn't find the proper animal, something happened, there were sirens going off, they had to take shelter, right? And it's obviously not what happened in the Beis Hamikdash. There was no such thing as sirens, but you grant me my point here. So you have a situation where the Korban Musaf got pushed off. If it got pushed off all the way to the time of Mincha Katana, which now was the ideal time for the Korban Tamid Shel Bein HaArbayim, the reality is that in the Beis Hamikdash, what would they have done first at that point? They would have done the Tamid Shel Bein HaArbayim, and not the Korban Musaf. Then they would have done the Korban Musaf afterwards. So really, even some of these decisions that we're talking about now here in terms of davening, they're pretty rare scenarios. But should they have occurred, they actually do in very, very much parallel the way the Korbanos would have been handled in a very rare scenario that usually never happened. So that's what I would say to answer that question.
Okay, thank you, Rav.
Yes.
What about an animal that has
a blemish? Yeah, that's a problem. You can't bring that as a korban. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Let's take a look now at the conclusion of the Shulchan Aruch on this particular sif. After the Ramah talks about the Mincha Ketana piece, v'yesh mi shehora she'ein osim kein betzibur lahakdim tfilas mincha letfilas musaf kedei shelo yitu. There are those who say that no matter what, this is the Rambam's psak halacha. No matter what, we don't change this order because usually it's musaf before mincha on any given time when there's musaf, Yom Tov, Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos. So don't change the order because you might throw somebody off and then they'll daven mincha and they'll forget or they'll make an error and they're not going to go back and daven musaf because musaf is further back in the siddur. I passed it already, so maybe I'm not able to. The tzibur might not know the difference. Oh, okay, I guess I missed that. I can't daven it anymore because it's on page 502 and mincha and musaf begins on page 448. So I'm not going to go back. It's probably wrong, right? So people don't know any better, and people might forget that because we're used to stuff. I daven mincha. I don't owe musaf. So no one's thinking in such terms typically. Look what the Mishnah Berurah says. Yud Gimel. This is a very rare scenario. Let's say I'm pressed for 10 minutes left before Shkia. 5 minutes till Shkia. I suddenly wake up and I realize I didn't daven Musaf and I didn't daven Mincha yet, and I have 5 minutes. and I only have to choose one over the other. I can't daven both. There won't be time. So what do? So he says, Yispalel Musaf, daven Musaf, if you have to make a choice under the gun here. Why? He gives you the svara. The mincha yesh lo tashlumin be'arvis. Mashain came in Musaf. Remember, we talked about there's no tashlumin for Musaf. You miss Musaf, it's gone. There's no making it up. But if I miss mincha and it's b'shogeg, here I woke up, something happened. Oy vey. Okay, so it's shogeg. It's not like I did this on purpose. It's shogeg. So I'll make up the mincha as a double mariv, and I'll daven Musaf right now because there's no opportunity for a makeup for Musaf. Uvesefer dagul mervava cholek alav mehar Yerushalmi shemeforosh lehipoch. The Dagul Mervava actually argues based on a Gemara in Yerushalmi, and he says the opposite actually, that really, you daven mincha with those few minutes that you have, and you'll forego most stuff that week. V'chein hiksha Allah b'sefer beis meir b'chidusha gon Rabbi Akiva Eiger miyashra v'dochak. So the Sefer Beis Meir asks, wait, what? How could you? What's wrong? Well, how do you explain going against the svara that we just said a moment ago that you can always make up the mincha, but the musaf is gone? And he says that Rabbi Akiva Eiger gave very, dochak, very like, it's one of those like you have to put yourself in a pretzel to try to find an answer to defend the Dagul Mervava, but it sounds like maybe he does. I don't have that Rabbi Akiva Eiger in front of me, but bottom line is, if you're in that situation, certainly less than ideal. You have here different opinions about what to do. He doesn't weigh in as to what ultimately you should do, whether you should follow the Dagul Mervava or you should follow his own Fibara here first, which is daven musaf, because you could always make up the mincha. Yes, Simeon, go ahead.
You see, Rob, that's contra to what we just learned. You can't do a tashlumim to have any effect whatsoever on Musaf, but you can do a tashlumim for the mincha.
Yep.
So if you have just one shot and you do the Musaf, then you still can do the tashlumim for mincha.
Right.
So why don't you follow that logic?
Yeah, that's the Magen Avram's logic. That's the first opinion, and then the Dagul Mervava is cholek. He disagrees with this. He disagrees. I could see a svara. You could say, well, can you really make up mincha? You knew you made a choice. Is that really shogeg? Right, and you still have, as David Noble pointed out, you still have the counter pressure of tadir v'sheino tadir kodem. So that's another halachic svara that would lead you to say, no, you should daven mincha. If you have to make choices here, tadir should come before the deino tadir. So there might be reasonable arguments made on the other side. But the Magen Avraham svara also makes sense, So he doesn't paskin one way or the other. The Mishnah Berurah himself here. I'll tell you why he doesn't paskin, because it's such a rare scenario to catch yourself 5 minutes before. Because even if you catch yourself 10 minutes before, you could get both in. You'll daven the Shemona Esrei of mincha, of Musaf, and then you'll say Shemona Esrei of mincha. As long as you start before, so you'll squeeze him in. This is a very rare scenario that you'd have to. This is the kind of thing that they love discussing in the base medrash, because it's a great theoretical question, because and different halachic svars are at play. Tadir v'sheino tadir, a tashlumin is at play. Right. So you have a lot of, it's a rich sugya to study, but it's very not practical, very impractical, because it just the reality of such a scenario is very slim.
I like the musa first because you put more pegs in more holes.
Right.
Accomplish.
That's right. All right. Let's look at your dalit. Shelo yitu. What are we worried about? That if I daven in the order of mincha and then musaf, says the Rambam, you're going to throw everybody off. Your dalit perish b'shar yamim lihispal mincha kodem musaf afilu kodem chatzos. Any other day of the week, any other time when there's mincha, when there's musaf, you always daven musaf first. On other days, you daven mincha before musaf, because you're davening before chatzos. So it's not, this is a very rare scenario. So the one time you daven musaf late, you didn't daven musaf and now it's late, you're going to flip the order. You're going to deal with a very, a crowd that is going to be confused, and better not to confuse people who might then make mistakes, and just say musaf and then do mincha. That is the last opinion. It's the Samech Hey in the top left-hand corner of the page. You see it? That packet is going from right to left. So flip that over, I think. Yes, there you go. Yud Dalet in the Mishnah Berurah. Look at the top of the Mishnah Berurah. There you go. There you go. Yud Dalet. You see that? Yeah. Okay. So now let's finish up. Let's go back up on top in the Shulchan Aruch. Here the Mechaber says B'Shabbos v'Yom Tov ein omrim baruchu achar kaddish basra, and then thrown in here at the end. V'ayin, this is the thing. This is probably the Rama or someone in reference of the Rama. V'ayin le'el simin kuf lamed gimel. What do we have here on Shabbos and Yom Tov? We don't say baruchu after the last kaddish of davening. And then he says, "Oh, take a look at an earlier simin kuf lamed gimel, which is a simin about." I believe that's about either mincha or mariv on a weekday. I have to go back and maybe pull off the shelf here. But he says, Sifkat on Tesvav in the Mishnah Berurah, he says, the Ramah, the Sham Nizbar Heitev Din Zeh. He says, oh, look over there in the Ramah. He explains this din very nicely. So I'm going to go to the shelf over here. I'm going to pull it off the shelf. This is Kuf Lamed Gimel. This is going to be like vase. Okay. Okay, Kuf. So this is Kuf Lamed was the end of Tfilas Shachris. Sorry, not Mincha and Marim. Sorry, I got that confused. Kuf Lamed Daled. Oops. Okay. There, the siman is Din Baruchu b'Shabbos, because they were talking about Baruchu in general. Over there, the siman right beforehand. They were talking about the end of davening, and so what about Baruchu, which is if you look in the, by the way, in some sidurim they have Baruchu in in at the end. Not in this Nusach Ashkenaz doesn't have that, but in this Sfaradim have before Aleinu at the end, towards the end of davening they do Baruchu again. So he explains over here. So the Mechaber over here, right, it's the same thing that he wrote here, which is the Shabbos v'Yom Tov ein omer baruchu achar kaddish batra. We don't say baruchu after the last kaddish, and then here the Rama explains or adds dafil b'mokom shenagu la'omer b'yemos hachol shema lo hayu yechidim beis hakneses kishamru baruchu. Why did they add a baruchu at the end? Because maybe some people weren't there when they did baruchu early, and that way we'll chap a Ryan at the end of davening. That there's the people who miss Baruch who get a Baruch later. Mikomok, that happened this morning. You're right. Yeah. On Shabbos v'Yom Tov ein la'omro. On Shabbat and on Shabbos and Yom Tov we don't. Now, do we do this here in the Sephardic Minyan on Shabbat here?
I think we do actually.
We do. Okay. The Hakol Bain Lebeis HaKnesses Kodem Baruch, because on Shabbos. Everybody comes to shul before Baruch Hu. On Shabbos, says the Rama. No one would miss it. It's Shabbos. Davening starts later. Who's coming so late that they're going to miss Baruch Hu? So it's Sif Hey. We don't do a Baruch Hu at the end. This is the Sfaradim on a regular day. Do it. Why? Because people come late to shul. So people get. So, but on Shabbos, he writes here on Shabbos and Yom Tov, no Baruch Hu at the end. The Rama, the Mishnah verse says, go take a look at what the Rama says. Yeah. He's a mitbayesh to embarrass people. He says, go look what the Rama said about this, and he says. So the Tesvav, he says, go take a look at the Rama from earlier in Shulchan Aruch. So he writes over there is that that. Even those who are no hate to say it during the week because people come late, right? So they chop it, at the end. He says they're all right. We don't say it at the end of davening. Everybody gets there before Baruch Hu. So there's no reason to say. There's no reason to say it earlier. To say it later, because everybody already accepted it, so we don't need to do Baruch Hu again.
It's interesting. Shulchan Aruch is saying this, but in the Siddur and the Sephardic Siddur, you say Baruch Hu
even on Shabbat. Even on Shabbat. So the Sephardic Siddurim, Shlomo is saying that they do say it even today. Maybe look, there's part of it is a reality. Yeah, David said, the generations have changed. I don't know if everybody gets there before Baruch Hu.
If you walk in
Yeah.
at this moment and everybody's going out, you still have to say the Baruch Hu.
Yes, that's
Right.
true.
Rabbi,
Yes.
here by Psuke de Zimbra, the shul is full.
Wow.
It's full. Okay, there you go. It's not fair. Yes, it's I'm here at Eretz Yisrael Machi. You know, what can I say? You know,
It could be one person who didn't make the Balchus. So
But they do say in the Ashkenazi shul Baruch Hu at the end
It makes sense.
Shabbat. Say,
the Ashkenazim say Baruch Hu at the end
during the week. Yes.
during the week. Yeah, look, I understand it. I get it. And that's the minhag. That's the minhag. By the way, here in the Mishnah Berurah down in over there earlier in Shulchan Aruch, he says that yesh makom shenogim lomar kaddish ubaruch hu achar gmar tefillah sheispalu kol hatzivur mimnei shelifam eish eze yechidim shabau achar baruch hu v'lo shalom baruch hu.
Maybe that's considered the end of Tefillah because it's become before Leilun Shabbat.
Yes, and Aleinu was added later, by the way.
Oh,
Meaning it's a tefillah,
so that's the
yeah.
answer to that. It's not
Um,
referring to the last
Yes, right.
stage of the.
The Hakol Ba'in is why not? But on Shabbos, no, everyone comes early. The Hakol Ba'in Mechulet. The Afilu Yim Eira Le'echad Shenisachel Lavo Achar Baruch Hu Mikol Makom Mistama Kvar Shama Baruch Hu Me'Ha'olam LaTorah. The reason also not to do it on Shabbos is because you chap Baruch Hu in Kriyas HaTorah, and he figures even if they miss, he says for the one or two guys that missed Baruch Hu at the regular time, they chapped it at Kriyas HaTorah.
Right.
So as long as somebody comes before the Maftir Aliyah, you know, they've chavt Baruch Hu. So we're not, we don't make it.
Do it on Shabbat.
But you do it. You said.
I'm saying, but back in the day, they did.
Yeah.
No,
So it's interesting that
what
they
I'm
just
saying,
that today the Sfaradim, even do it.
But maybe.
But Tommy, on Shabbat, do they do it in the Ashkenazi shul in Israel?
What?
A Baruch Hu at the end?
Yes, on weekdays. Yes.
On weekdays, but not on Shabbat.
Not on
right?
Shabbos. No.
See, there you go. On Shabbos, they don't do it.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is
Yeah.
maybe because what we have Safko refers to not because it just was added in the end. Leilun Shabbat, right?
Yeah.
But he
So
doesn't.
maybe Leilun Shabbat was not there when you made.
I think they already had Aleinu at the end, but the point is that it's at the end of davening. You know, Aleinu, that's the very very much the end of tefillah. I think they had Aleinu. Actually, it's right here, right up to the. I'm right up to this, right over here.
Congregation on the first one, if someone comes in, it has to be said again.
Right, he talks about Kedushas Uvalat Sion, and then Asalat and Lattes Kodem Kedusha de Sidra.
Coming out.
And it doesn't mention.
I have to say it.
Or does he mention Aleinu? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. All right. So let's pause here. We're at the end of the Simon. And I have to also get going to this the parade today. There's the Israel parade in the city. So yeah, of course. So next week we will continue with the next Simon, Reish Pei Zayin. So by the way, I'm not sure. By the way, just as the last point here, I'm not sure. I'd be curious to know why Sfaradim today do stay Baruch Hu at the end. It's in the Sidur in that popular Sidur that Sfaradim use, which is Eidot HaMizrach. Right, and they do it towards the end of Tefillah. And is it also before Leilun Shabbat during the weekdays? I know you're stuck with us Ashkenazim during the weekdays, Shlomo, but
No, I think so too.
but if it's but that's, I don't know. It's a good question. If anybody has, they do it also on the weekdays before Leilun. So I don't know why on Shabbat they still do it. Given that there probably isn't really a need of the majority of people, if they heard it even at the latest of Kriyat HaTorah, they heard Baruch Hu. So I don't know. I'd be curious if anybody speaks to any other Sephardi friends that they have who can explain this minhag that, which again the Mechaber says differently. But it's actually, I look at this. By the way, did you see this? I didn't notice this. In the Sharei Tshuva, I look down right now. In the Sharei Tshuva, he writes the Kasav. I'm not sure what the sefer is called. Mem Chet Bet. I'm not sure what that stands for. He says the Be'eretz Hatzvi u'Be'eretz Mitzrayim. So the Egyptian community. I'm not sure who's Eretz Hatzvi. I'm not sure which country and community that's a reference to. No Agin Lomar Baruch Hu Gam B'Shabbos V'Yom Tov Achar Kaddish Basra. There they did say it on Shabbos. So the Egyptian community, back when there used to be such a community, the Jews lived in Egypt. And Eretz Hatzvi, I'm not sure what Eretz Hatzvi is. That's not sure. That's some communities in
So that's
where
fine.
the gazelle and the deer
It's
roam
fine.
in some African country. I'm not sure what this is a reference to, but he says there they did say Baruch Hu on Shabbos. So okay, there are some communities that already had a tradition. So maybe there are some, the Sfaradis, there were communities that they knew that their chaver were coming late. There's only reason to do this is for people who come late. So there's no other reason. We do it because of some other reason.
Somebody missed the Torah.
Right. So for the latecomers, even I guess already the generations were changing. And some communities had to respond to the reality that folks weren't coming early enough to even hear any Baruch Hu in shul. Anyways, so next week we'll continue with Reish Pei Zayin, very short. Then we'll go right to Reish Pei Ches. Reish Pei Zayin deals with the Nichum Avelim and Bikur Cholim on Shabbos. Can I engage in these activities? How do I engage them? Because they're not supposed to have bakoshos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Shabbos. And Nichum Avelim, to acknowledge Avelus on Shabbos. Are we allowed to do that? So we'll talk about that next week, and then we'll probably also begin the next siman, which is actually not short, about the laws of Tanis on Shabbos, and you have to be careful to not refrain from eating, for the first half of the day, and we'll talk about a Tanis Chalom. What happens if you were there a Tanis, right, in a dream? Hasn't happened to me. Thank you. All right, but we'll talk about it next week.
Rob Yashikov.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good